The Hollywood Chamber presents Voices of Influence with Dwayne Gathers. What does Black History Month mean to you?
Well, I think this is a great opportunity to recognize the important history of blacks in this country, but also as challenging and as painful as that can be, to recognize and celebrate the significant contributions that blacks have made to this country. And certainly to recognize that black history is so intertwined with American history, and black history is American history. But more importantly, it's an opportunity to celebrate triumphs over adversity and to celebrate black excellence as we move forward.
Are there historical figures or contemporaries in Hollywood that inspire you?
That's an interesting question because I'm generally not wowed by celebrity, but I would say the individual that I'm just most wowed by and inspired by is actually not an American, and that's former president of South Africa, Nelson Mandela, who I had the opportunity to meet twice in a previous role that I had working for the U.S. State Department. But I would say, from my standpoint, I had the opportunity to do a podcast for 2.5 years focusing on and celebrating, elevating diverse and emerging voices in the civic conversation of our region. So I really am most inspired by those men and women who are showing up and doing the hard but necessary work of building community every day at the grassroots level, who may not have the big recognition, but I'm really, really inspired by people who I met along the way in that path, that journey, including people like Lorna Little, the first African American woman to become president and CEO of the St. Anne's Family Services, which is a 100-plus-year-old organization here in Los Angeles serving women. And of course, my longtime friend, Mel Culpepper, who's been the CEO of the Boys and Girls Club of Hollywood. And I just think what she does with our youth is just so inspiring. And that's what inspires me, is the work that they do every day.
As a longstanding board member of the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce and previously co-chair of the Chamber's Economic Development Committee, how have you seen or how do you see the organization contributing to diversity and inclusion in the community?
I started with the chamber as a co-chair of the Economic Development Committee back in like 2014, 2015. And I remember one of the roles of the committee was to put together the annual Economic Development Summit. And that particular year, 2015, I want to say, there was a panel on economic activity across Hollywood, and we had a number of representatives from diverse industries, gaming, fashion, entertainment, healthcare, et cetera. And the then board chair reminded me by saying, this was the first time that we've ever had an economic development summit with a panel where all the guests were women. And I thought that that was interesting. These were just, up and coming and emerging and diverse leaders who were doing fascinating things to me. And I didn't select them because they were women, but it was great that we did that. So I just think, the chamber has done a better job. We can always do a better job by just being more intentional about looking across the landscape of our diverse community to say, who are we inviting to participate on these panels, on these conferences? But I think we're doing a much better job.
What specific initiatives do you believe can be or should be implemented to further recognize and celebrate Black heritage and culture in Hollywood?
Well, I think I first want to recognize the great work that was done by Anna Martinez and team celebrating and recognizing recent Walk of Fame honorees and listing out all the black men and women who previously received stars on the Walk of Fame. Again, I think, that's just but one sector, but arts and culture is so important to Hollywood and its history, and to recognize the men and women, the black men and women who've come through this community and gone on to great careers, thus earning a star, is very, really important. But what else can we be doing? This is a chamber of commerce. So, we could be recognizing and celebrating all the black businessmen and women, whether they're members of the chamber board or whether they're members of the chamber at all. We should be using this month to recognize, their current work in building community here in the region. And then I think the other thing that always interests me is, what are we doing as a chamber, and what can we be doing as a chamber to nurture the next generation of entrepreneurs? And I think, there's so many great things going on in Hollywood, but how are we connecting that to our schools, particularly to our middle schools and high schools? And I think we could be using this month as an opportunity to match our black businessmen and women with schools to serve as mentors, maybe to spend a day of shadowing them in their work, and passing on the message that business and entrepreneurship are good things for them to aspire to.
What advice do you have for African American professionals looking to become actively involved and influential in their communities?
I certainly feel very fortunate to have shown up in LA 20 years ago and somehow got noticed and or just raised my hand to say I'd be willing to do that. And then, of course, once you say you're willing to do that and you show up and do the work, you get pulled into more things. So I think I've been pulled into more things than I can say, but it's been a joy to do that. But I would say, one of the things I learned and heard a lot in my own podcast, talking to civic leaders. We're talking about the enormity of the city, the enormity of some of the challenges, the enormity of some of the opportunities. And my whole thing is to say, it's okay to start small. So, look in your own backyard and say, where can I make a difference? Either at my neighborhood level, my block level, my community level, and then you can branch out to citywide and region-wide and statewide. But certainly, don't be afraid to just sort of jump in and just sort of raise your hand and say that I'm interested in doing this. And certainly one of the things, as someone also looks at expanding their work and particularly serving on boards and in leadership, I recall, one podcast guest that I had who said, she said, if there's no seat at the table, bring your own damn chair.
What is the role and or responsibility of an organization such as the Chamber in identifying and elevating diverse voices in their respective organizations?
Well, that's a great question, and I think it actually comes to the crux of how and why I started my own podcast back in 2020 during the pandemic, because I would go to various chamber and other organization meetings around the city and oftentimes see the same people over and over and over again. And I would say, are there no others that can be picked out here? And so it's always been sort of a interest of mine to be much more intentional and to encourage my board colleagues to be much more intentional about who else is out there that we're not bringing into our civic conversation. And I speak specifically during the protests that were happening in 2020, and I reference a memo that I sent out to our board colleagues in June of that year about how we can respond to those challenges and what we as an organization can be doing. And I found a copy of that memo that I wrote to the board, and I'll just quote the last piece of it, which said, "Last but not least, we as an organization are proud of the breadth and depth and diversity of our chamber board and management, and I'm grateful for all that they do. But however, we will continue to seek out and engage new, diverse, and emerging leaders in our own community and invite them to a seat at our table." And so, certainly in my tenure as board chair and my recent tenure on the nominating committee of the chamber, I've sort of used that in my own way, working with others, including Lupita Sanchez Conejo, who's been a great collaborator in this, is being more thoughtful about saying, who else are we inviting into leadership in our organization? And certainly, I am extremely proud of our upcoming executive board nominee class, which is, I think, the most diverse group that we've had in board leadership in my tenure at the chamber.
Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel or visit hollywoodchamber.net for more information.